In the world of aviation, collaborations between nations are common. Great and brilliant planes can be drafted, designed and built by multiple countries to make even better planes using the best technology each nation has to offer. So, in that spirit, I thought I'd build a few of them in kit form and put them all together in one big video for your viewing pleasure. You get more content, and I get some more space cleared on my shelves. It's a win-win. So, from my stash I got out 3 planes in 1/72nd scales for build and review. We'll see how they go together, how I painted them, and how, as vintage kits, they hold up in the modern day. So, here's what we'll be making. The Anglo-French supersonic strike aircraft known as the Sepecat Jaguar, the Anglo-West German-Italian Panavia multi-role combat aircraft, later known as the Tornado, and the Eurofighter Typhoon, a joint venture between manufacturers from France, Germany, Spain, the UK, and Italy. Why these ones in particular? Well, they were the ones I had on hand, okay? Anyway, there'll be timestamps for you to navigate to different planes in the description, or you can just watch all of it in one go. And at the end, we'll round things up and admire the planes in all their glory. But without any further ado, let's get on with the builds. Look at that, the Sepecat Jaguar. This is actually new. The stick's kind of, the print's covered up, but on the side you can see it's new. This is the first ever boxing of this kit, so this is brand new. Essentially, well, not brand new. It has been opened, but this was the first time this kit was ever released. So, what do we got inside? Well, I have opened this before, by the way. So we got the instructions, which are quite extensive. You've got paint scheme here. You've got quite a few decals, lots of common ones, as well as some alternate schemes, 2 of them. That's always nice. You can build it however you want. Inside the box, with regards to parts, you have a stand, which comes with the kit, so that's nice. And we also have 2 clear parts for the canopy, and we have a very large fuselage, which comes in 2 halves, and the stabilizer is just in 1 piece instead of being 2 pieces pressed together. That's actually quite sort of modern, like a lot of older kits don't construct like this. So that's very interesting. And we've got, here we've got things like seats, a lot of the pylons and bombs parts, wheels, more bombs for the underwing stuff. I think that the wings themselves have actually been constructed already by the previous owner. They would have come in 2 halves, but someone's already done that for me, which is nice. And we've also got the rear wings, plus the other stuff like the intakes, the outtakes, the exhausts and whatnot. And yeah, so this is actually quite detailed for a kit of its time. We can actually see here, tooled back in 1977 by Airfix Products Limited. Very interesting to see that, and of course, yes, this is new. There's a lot of raised detail, which is quite shallow. You can barely see it in most lights. However, there is also quite a nice amount of recessed detail on the wings, which is always good to see. The plastic is very thick, very smooth, and very sturdy, which I really like. And there are a lot of parts, and I imagine should come to quite a lot of detail. So, without any further ado, let's get on with the build. Oh, and of course, I'll be putting all of the parts that you might need outside of what's included in the box on screen now. This Sepecat Jaguar was first tooled in 1977, and I managed to get pretty much one of the first ones ever made. As such, flash from slack mold tools was minimal and the part fit was absolutely gorgeous. This kit was last reboxed in 2004 and hasn't been in the Airfix range for a very long while, which I think's a shame because this plane is really cool. Anyway, enough historical waffle, let's get back to construction. The fuselage of the plane fit together very nicely. Most of the detail is raised, which I had to sacrifice in order to sand the join seam between the parts flat, but since on the underside nobody should notice. This plane is very geometric, lots of sharp corners. The chunky wings, which I believe had already been glued together by a previous owner, were simply glued on top of the fuselage into these recessed chunks. This is a bit precarious, as without anything above to secure the wings in place, they can droop and not weld to the other parts correctly. You may need to hold these parts down for a while until they set with the poly cement. The wheel wells are very flat and not recessed very deeply owing to tooling limitations at the time, and there isn't really any cockpit detail bar the pilot figure either. This kit does lack in the fine detail areas, but it is a joy to put together and arguably redeems it somewhat. It's also impressively large for a 1/72nd scale aircraft, even larger than a Harrier, which really shocked me when I first saw it. That is a nice thing though, as it makes the kit a lot less fiddly to handle. But with that out of the way, I got on with painting it up. Before we get on with that though, I'd like to shine a spotlight on the wide array of options available when building this kit. You can, if you so desire, build it with or without an external fuel tank on the undercarriage, or alternatively with some bombs. There are also various other types of bombs that you can place on the underwing weapon pylons as well, of which I chose to go simple with and just chose these big chunky bombs, which I painted in Humbrol number 163 dark green. You can also cut out a section in the fuselage or the tank to slide in a medium-sized Airfix stand, which very handily came bundled with this kit in the box. Anyway, spotlight over, on with the painting. This kit instructs you to paint an RAF camo scheme, but it doesn't have Humbrol paint colours listed as in 1977 Airfix still wasn't owned by them yet. So, fuck off Oracle. So, I decided to paint in what colours I just thought fit the scheme the best. Having primed the model in Humbrol number 1 grey primer for the base, I chose number 64 light grey on the underside, and for the grey on top I chose number 164 dark sea grey. Because I wanted the paint to have some more depth however, I also sponged a mixture of the dark sea grey and number 123 extra dark sea grey on top as well, just in a few areas to give some texture to the paint and the effect of some light fading. For the green camo pattern, I used number 163 dark green and did the camo by eye roughly to what the scheme showed on the instruction sheet. Other colours were required for smaller areas, with number 11 silver being used on the wheel wells, number 29 dark earth, and number 33 matte black for this bit on the tail fin, which I think is some kind of detector thingy. Please enlighten me in the comments or on my fan mail address. Number 24 training yellow on these tiny fins above the canopy, some Vallejo clear red and orange on these various lights, and Humbrol number 53 gunmetal on the jet exhaust. With that done, I added a landing gear to the mould before varnishing. I had lost the front leg, so I had to makeshift a new one out of some sprue. It's not particularly accurate, but it does its job. The wheels were painted in silver and black, and I coated the entire model in number 35 gloss spray varnish in preparation for applying the kit's decals. This kit had two decal schemes, though an unfortunate mishap with some paint meant I could probably only really do one of them. That being a plane from the number 54 squadron, with these very nice yellow and black markings on the side. The decals were of very nice quality for 1977. When I got them, the backing film had severely yellowed, but I was able to bleach them clear again by leaving them taped to a window for about 3 weeks. The decals were thin, but they were sturdy and the colours were very good despite not being so detailed. They went on with ease, and a little bit of Humbrol decal fix helped soften them into what little raised detail there was. The checkered decals on the air intakes are slightly too large, at least according to this post on the modelling forum, but I had no problem getting them into a decent position. There was just one large decal for the markings underneath this plane's external fuel tank with lots of backing film in between each line. Thankfully, the gloss varnish prevented any silvering under the film, and overall, all the decals turned out absolutely perfect. One thing I neglected to add is that this cat has a fuck ton of stencils, like like literally 20 of the same goddamn no step decal all across the model. I didn't need to add them, they're barely going to be seen, but I added them anyway, for you. This clip playing in the background is over 13 minutes, sped up God knows how quick. I hope you're bloody happy! With my paint fading applied during the painting process, I felt there wasn't much need to do too extensive weathering, especially due to the lack of much recessed detail. In the recessed lines there were, as well as the engine exhaust, wheel wells and vents, I applied my go-to black enamel wash before varnishing over the model in gloss again to seal everything in, then gluing in the optional armament, air brakes, pilots and canopy to finish off the model. This model was stunning! It's not very detailed by today's standards, but it's got very good part fit, partially due to being an example from right back when the kit was first tooled, and its parts are all of very nice quality, as are the decals. I'm very happy with my paintwork too. The sponged on fading effect looks really good and is a technique I'll definitely be using in the future. I think I have to thank my friend Oasis Oracle for introducing me to that, as I doubt that I would have tried using sponges to paint had he not done it in his videos building Airfix and Warhammer kits. It definitely helps elevate the detail in the kit that might have otherwise looked rather flat without much recessed detail to add extra visual interest. I can't speak for newer boxings where the tooling might have deteriorated, but if you can get an early release like this one, then I think I can comfortably tell you you're in for a very fun building experience. Anyway, let's move on to our next build, one even larger, and dare I say, more articulated. Right, next up, it's the multi-role combat aircraft. So, in here we have decals, and we have 3 schemes here. One for the German Air Force, one for the Royal Air Force from the UK, and one with different countries on them. Lots of them. So that'll be exciting. I think I'm going to do that one. Seems interesting. We have instructions, quite a lot of them. Very nice big sheet here. Quite detailed instruction steps and multiple paint schemes. Yep. And have taken a look in this before, but I haven't really taken a very close look. So inside this Ziploc bag, we should find all parts of the kit. So we have the fuselage, which comes in 2 halves, top half and the bottom half. Everything's in white plastic, although I will be painting over it. And there's the wings, which come in 2 halves, and these, once I install them, should be able to rotate, although I'm not sure how that'll work when I'm trying to paint them. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Comes with a stand included, and in the kit we have multiple sprues containing what I presume to be the stabilizers. Yep, here they are, along with various oh look, actual cockpit detail. That's the control panel, the exhausts, landing gear, various bombs, more bombs. Ooh, 2 pilots in very nice quality. The moulding is actually quite detailed for this, and 2 seats to go as well. Yeah, panel line detail is raised instead of recessed, but that's alright. That's to be expected with this here. There's a bit of damage here. I think this must have been taken off the sprue, and it's taken a chunk out of the top half with it, but that's not too bad. This kit is quite massive. It's a very chunky plane. I'm really looking forward to making it, but speaking of which, I suppose without further ado, let's get on with the build. First tooled in 1975, with this example being a rebox from 1976, the Tornado, also known as the MRCA or Multi-Role Combat Aircraft, is a very interesting kit. It was first made when the plane was still being prototyped, not entering service until 1979. Its lineage ended in 2003, having been superseded by 1989 tooling last seen in 2019. There was some flashing here, notably on the clear part, but other than that, this kit is surprisingly clean, which is to be expected as a recently tooled kit. Constructing this kit began with the cockpit tub, which to my shock actually contained actual detail. On either side of the two seats are arrays of controls, and in front of them are various dials and buttons that I wasn't used to seeing in other contemporary Airfix kits, including the Jaguar. I painted these in black with the details picked out in silver. Due to the way that plastic kits have different weight distribution than real planes, weight needed to be added to the nose in order to prevent the plane from sitting on its tail when resting on its landing gear. The instructions suggest using plasticine, but for the sake of ensuring there would definitely be enough weight, I chose to instead use liquid gravity, also known as a load of tiny metal pellets which I stuck in place with some PVA glue under the cockpit tub and at the front of the nose.
Ah, right. No, that's too much.
This plane's defining feature is its variable sweep wings, which on this model are actually functional. As you can see in the instructions, a bar connecting the two wings allows them to pivot in tandem, provided you don't glue them together. However, I was concerned about the sturdiness of this mechanism. My tests had found that the pivot could become unslotted with nothing holding it in from the other side, ruining the wing mechanism. As such, I carved some retaining nuts from spare bits of sprue I had lying around and glued them into place on the ends of the pivot, making the wing mechanism much more secure. Having fixed that, I was able to install it into the plane and glue on the upper fuselage. I chose to have the rear wings be static for simplicity when painting, though they can be left to rotate freely as they're actually stabilator type control surfaces in which the whole wing rotates rather than just being moving elevator surfaces on static wings. To finish off the main construction, I masked off the canopy with some tape and glued it into place over the cockpit with some PVA glue. With most of the construction I could perform before painting complete, I PVA'd in the air brakes and landing gear doors to mask off their wells and prepared for painting. First, I gave all the surfaces a quick brush coat of Humbrol No. 1 primer to help further coats of paint stick better. I then applied a coat of Tamiya spray primer, covering the rest of the model. However, whether due to false advertising or me not shaking the can enough, the supposedly fine primer particles turned out to produce an incredibly matte finish which I had to sand now with some 1000 grit wet and dry, rather to the detriment of the raised detail, unfortunately. Nonetheless, with that out of the way, I got out my can of Humbrol white acrylic spray and oh my god, this is matte as well! Having dragged my dad out to Hobbycraft to get some new paint, I settled on a few small cans of Revel 04 Weeb Gloss Spray. I applied these in many coats over the course of some number of days until I had a finish which I considered passable enough to start detailing. Then, with some very skilled use of masking tape, I painted various areas in number 19 red, number 33 black, and number 53 gunmetal to create this really cool prototype scheme. Upon removing the mask, I touched up any paint bleed with some dabs of Humbrol No. 34 matte white lightly painted on. I also painted in the areas hidden by the pivoting wings with number 11 silver, along with the root of the wing. There was more noticeable raised detail here, but unfortunately that got rather sanded down. Nonetheless, I soldiered on and sealed all the paint in ready for the decals. Despite also putting these decals out in the sun for weeks, they unfortunately did not fully bleach, and the backing film was still somewhat yellowed. This was an irritant as this plane was white, so any miscolorations would stick out. A lot. Nonetheless, I soldiered on, placing the eclectic variety of roundels and markings all around the model. Thankfully, this model was pretty light on stencils compared to the Jaguar, so this process went by rather a lot quicker. I sealed them all in with gloss varnish to give them a nice sheen, intending to leave the model complete like that. But then I realised that the wingtips need to be painted in black as well, and I'd forgotten to do that. I got out my trusty masking tape, painted on the black, but when it came to peeling it off, 3 of the 4 wing rounders tore in half on the masking tape and got stuck to it. This really upset me, as it essentially ruined the look of the model. Slightly hyperbolic, but you know what I mean. Despite trying to wet the tape to remove the stuck decals, I couldn't get them off, and I didn't fancy my chances at hand painting new ones on, so I sealed in the wingtip paint and conceded defeat. The decals certainly did dock this kit some points. Being 48 years old, I should really have expected them to be somewhat worse in quality, but considering the Jaguar's decals, only a year junior to this, fared far better, it's not a good look. Maybe my varnish coats were too thin to seal them in, but even then they should have adhered at least a bit better than they did. Moving on to the more positive aspects though, I was very proud of how the paint turned out here. The scheme is really bold, and whilst not for the faint-hearted and requiring quite a bit of masking tape, it's well worth it. The parts were of decent quality, those had some chunks taken out from either the factory workers or a previous owner tearing off the sprue, and most of the panel line detail was raised and ended up being sanded off by the end of the build. Whilst being very bold and standing out from other builds in my cabinet, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the Jaguar. But let's leave the past behind us, eh? No? Oh, I should stop trying to write jokey segues. Let's move on from these old models, and move on to something fresher and newer. And by newer, I mean 1990.
Okay. Just one final thingy-bob. One final plane. Eurofighter Typhoon. I haven't actually opened this yet, so I don't actually know what to expect inside here. Alrighty. So, as usual, we've got an array of paints, 2 paint brushes in size that's in size 2 and no size 0 and 4. So some good variants there. In the instructions, we will also find a very square decal sheet with a couple very tiny decals on it. Yep. And now what we find in the bag. God, it's bigger than I expected. Oh my god, it's massive. So in here we'll find 2 sprues that have been used to mould the fuselage of the plane, which actually used to be 1 sprue by the looks of things. It's been cut in half. Another sprue which has been folded over like this to sort of make it into 2 sprues, I guess. And 1 more sprue. Very angular. Anyway, as for the details, this kit was, I believe, tooled in about 1990. The parts are a bit greasy, as you can see, but it's very detailed for its age. It's got a mixture of raised and recessed details, but definitely a lot more recessed ones now. Mold quality is high. It's got lots of different parts, and it's even bigger than the other ones. I thought this was going to be a small one. Oh god. Anyway, the parts are very thick. Bear in mind that this is a very new release of this old kit. Despite that, it's not got much flash on parts at all. As a matter of fact, it's got basically none. So this tool has been taken very good care of. Yeah, I have nothing to say about this. So it comes with 2 drop tanks potentially. Very big parts here, like you know, the top and bottom of the plane are all molded as one thing, and yeah, this is a very good set of parts. Anyway, suppose let's get down to business.
This Eurofighter Typhoon kit is from 1990 originally, though this boxing is from 2011. I imagine this particular example rolled off the production line around about 2022 to 23. Like the Tornado, it was also tooled while the plane was still in prototype phase, as the Eurofighter EFA, though depressing amounts of real-world bureaucracy meant that the RAF only actually put any of these into service in 2007. Talk about development hell. All that is to say that this kit is actually of reasonable quality for its age. This was made roughly 30 years or more after its tooling, unlike the others which were comparatively quite early pressings, yet there actually wasn't all that much flash to be found. Though one slightly disappointing thing is that despite this kit being tooled nearly 15 years later than the other two kits, it still had lots of raised panel lines instead of recessed ones. That's not modern! I would have thought that they would have had more precise mold cutting utensils to facilitate such details by that point. Either way, that's 1 point docked there. This kit was actually superseded this year. In 2024, Airfix announced a retooling of their Typhoon starter set, which included a shadow stand and fully recessed details. Expected winter 2024 to 25. That wasn't sponsored, by the way, I just want to clarify. Moving on with the build, I was bowled over by the size of this kit. While not the longest of the three, it was undoubtedly the widest with its hot, sexy, Dorito-like delta wing construction, making this mold over 15 centimeters wide and having a very large overall footprint. I'm going to need a bigger cabinet to store my molds in. Again. This kit had a lot less interior detail than the Tornado, with no moulded detail on the dashboard and no decals to compensate either. Part fit wasn't perfect, with the cockpit tub being inserted into the top half of the fuselage instead of being glued to the bottom, and you might struggle to get everything aligned correctly if you're going to build this kit yourself. This kit also needs 5 grams of weight in the nose, so I deposited some liquid gravity in the forward section, making sure not to overfill it and obstruct the path of the articulated front canards on this kit. With that, I mated the two halves together in possibly the simplest Airfix construction there's ever been. Before attaching any of the smaller parts, I set about painting the main fuselage of the model in Humbrol No. 167 Barley Grey. Now, this is a pretty irritating problem with this kit. As a starter set, it came with 6 pots of paint, 3 of which were shades of grey. Unfortunately, they were not very well mixed out of the box, so when I used them I initially had some serious concerns as to whether there would actually be any noticeable difference between them when painted on the model. It took a lot of mixing and watering down to get these paints to a usable consistency, and by the end I still wasn't wholly satisfied with the finish. Thankfully, my weathering later on in this build mostly concealed it. Thin your paint, people! The wheel wells had already been painted in No. 130 satin white, and I would like to reiterate that all white paint is crap. It had terrible opacity, coverage, texture. I hate it. I can say though that this plane easily has the most detail in its wheel wells compared with the other two. The others just have flat surfaces, but this one's got proper recesses and struts going all around across the wells. Well done, Airfix! Not wanting to ruin the finish of the base grey coat by handling it unprotected, I gave it a coat of Humbrol No. 135 satin acrylic spray varnish before applying the finer details. This plane does have a more matte/satin finish in real life, so I decided to respect that fact for this. Following this step, I painted the area just forward of the as yet unattached engine exhaust in Humbrol No. 11 silver, followed by a thin stripe of No. 165 medium sea grey. No. 165 was also added on the leading edges of the canards, the nose cone, these nubbins on the wingtips, and the tail fin. This kit handily comes with full colour painting instructions on its box, which is a nice addition. But having painted everything I could, it was now time to move on to the nightmare of final assembly. First, I glued on all the pylons for the plane's vast weapons arsenal. I then attached the landing gear, which proved to be extremely temperamental as they would never stay upright as I glued them in, forcing me to bodge together an incredibly dysfunctional array of paint pots, brushes and other junk to balance the legs in place whilst the glue set. Then I glued in the plane's air intake, which had warped to being too wide to fit flush with the rest of the model, and led to me having to pinch it together for about half an hour as it dried out. I then had to add the landing gear doors, which required even more fiddling about to get to fit right, which caused me and my haggard soul immense turmoil.
No.
Finally, I attached all the weapons and auxiliary fuel tanks, which I had pre-painted in the colours illustrated on the box, and finished off the construction with the air brake, exhausts, and nose cone. 2 notes. First of all, the exhausts are painted in a mix of 3 parts black, 1 part silver, as is instructed on the box. You could use a gunmetal colour for a similar finish. Second of all is that I still haven't added the tail fin at this point. This was mainly because it would make decal application less awkward by keeping it separate whilst aligning the markings, and also because it meant that varnishing would be easier as the fin wouldn't obstruct any areas of the model that needed covering. The decals on this kit are of far higher quality, which was to be expected as this kit is far newer than the other 2. These decals are printed by Cartograph and slide off the sheet effortlessly and have very good print quality. There also aren't many of them, partially due to starter sets generally having simpler decal schemes with no stencils, and partially due to the fact that the Typhoon is pretty bare marking wise. Just 1 roundel on each wing, on the top surface of the left and bottom surface of the right. There were a few stencils, the registration number, and that was it for the fuselage. The biggest decals were on the tail fin, with the squadron markings in bold colours adorning it. Having completed the scheme, I varnished over the kit in gloss to assist with the weathering step, and proceeded to the final phase of this final build. For this plane, one still in active service with the RAF, I decided to really dirty it up. As such, I applied plenty of panel line wash to the recessed details, wiping off the excess with brushes and a sponge soaked in white spirit. Really, you should be using a cotton bud here, but I didn't have any on hand, so I had to use other means to get it off. I then applied copious amounts of black weathering dust from Revell all over the model to simulate smoke stains on the plane. Possibly too much. I asked some smarter model makers than I, and they said it's not exactly realistic, but if you're satisfied with it, then you can do what you like. I personally thought I'd gone a bit too far, so once the literal dust had settled, I wiped some of it off with a paper towel. And having finished that, I applied 1 final coat of satin spray varnish, affixed the clear canopy piece and tail fin to the model, and my work was complete. I was definitely pleased with this model, although it did feel like it was somewhat lacking in its presentation. The scheme is mostly a solid grey and there aren't very many decals, so it's not the most interesting to look at when built as standard. My weathering does do a lot to make it more interesting, however. The raised power lines are disappointing considering this kit's relative recency compared with the other models, and overall I feel it does lack somewhat in just being interesting compared with the other models. So, let's compare them all side by side. The Jaguar was bold, long, angular, and the signature RAF camo was really fun to paint. The Tornado had articulated wings and a really striking and unique colour scheme that really elevated it, even if other aspects of the model were flawed. The Typhoon, compared to the others, feels somewhat lacking, at least in the scheme you're offered straight out of the box. This plane has some truly gorgeous and unique display schemes, and if you want to make any of those, I'd love to see them. But as is, aside its distinctive shape, this Typhoon doesn't really have much to offer. Those old kits might be flawed, but they really do stand out. If I had to pick a favourite, I'd definitely pick the Jaguar. Whilst I love the scheme of the Tornado, I can't really enjoy it fully until I fix the decals on the wings that got messed up. The Jaguar, on the other hand, whilst being smaller and not being articulated, I think still offers a lot in terms of visual interest, and its decals really elevates as the best of the 3. Of all the models we've seen today, I think that the big cat came out on top. So, that's that. 3 models, 3 planes. The video's over! But the thing is, I wanted to do something big for this video. Making 3 models and telling people what I think of them isn't quite enough for me. So, to fix that, to quench that thirst, we need to go and touch grass. Oh.
Come on, we got work to do. Come on.
is an actual Jaguar that was in service with the RAF from 1977 to 2006. Registration XZ394. I've got my dad just off screen holding up the script for me, so excuse me if my eyeline isn't correct. It was bought by a local farmer, and it was parked here in this field for the RAF Sculthorpe Heritage Centre. And the engines have been removed, presumably so nobody flies away with it whilst no one's looking, but otherwise it's all here. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's the same model as the model I've made, so let's compare the two. So, as for the noses of the two planes, there's a transparent section here with a light in it. That's not moulded on this, and also I'd say that the snooty nozzle thing, I think it's some kind of pitot tube. It's a lot thicker on the model compared to how thick it is in real life, although the detail of it tapering a bit in the middle has been captured very well in kit form. The modelling of the gear wells on the underside isn't perfect. They're shallow and don't go in as deep as on the real thing, and this section of the gear doors doesn't open as it does on the real thing. However, overall the gears are represented rather accurately in model form compared to real life. However, of course, the front landing gear has been done a disservice by the fact that this is just a piece of sprue. I lost the real part. Obviously, there isn't much in the way of panel line detail, so you can't really compare on that, although the panel lines present on this plane are actually pretty sparse and rather shallow, so there's not much to worry about there. The air brakes and back gear doors have actually been represented pretty well on this. Mine aren't hinged so dramatically. As a matter of fact, I installed them rather poorly, so they're wonky, but oh well. And overall, I think that this does a good job at representing the side profile of the aircraft. This one isn't fitted with pylons or bombs for obvious reasons. I don't know if it ever was. I'm sure we can show some pictures on screen of a time when it did have them. And my model does. My model does not have air intakes that go all the way back to the engine. However, this model here has air intakes which go all the way to the back of the plane because there is no engine at all. This scoopy bit has been represented pretty accurately on the model. However, these smaller divots and air intakes are not present, as are these exhaust pipes, which do not appear on the model. There is also no drop tank / bomb thingy on the bottom of the plane, although there are what I believe to be mounting points for it that you can see here. The real plane does have this sensor section on the rear wing, which is present on the kit. The kit actually has these small swooshes on them, which have actually been torn off of the real thing. The kit, as I have painted it, doesn't have much detail with the metal paneling and these rivets on the back of it behind the engines. So that's not particularly accurate in that respect. However, it does get a plus in that this actually has engines and that doesn't. this rear sense cap is also present on the model but not in real life, obviously because it's been removed. Overall, parts are a bit thicker on the model than they are in real life. The air brakes are very thin, as are the landing gear doors, whereas on the model they are thicker relative to real life. In this model, the slats on the side of the air intakes are presented with them open, fixed like that, whereas of course they can pivot into in and out positions, and there weren't any alternate schemes or parts which you could use to represent this. So in that respect, this model is a failure. Several smaller aspects, like how the cockpit has sharp corners here but rounded corners here, are also not necessarily accurate. This model is also significantly cleaner than the real thing. I didn't really do much in the way of weathering apart from some panel line washes, whereas this has real lichen and moss and cobwebs. Isn't that exciting? Overall, I can say that this kit was built with a lot more detail than the real thing. Wait, no, no. Overall, my model is actually pretty decent in terms of it capturing the likeness of the real thing. However, it does have some issues with it. There are parts which have not been molded quite correctly, and the thickness of some parts has been changed, mainly to facilitate the parts not snapping in half as you're handling them. One part that I can decisively say is at least somewhat better on my model than on the real thing is that the decals here have silvered. These are yellowed, as they say, as fuck, and I can't say they're of particularly high print quality, although they do conform to some of the raised details which aren't present on my model. This example also has such things as realistic oil staining, which I can't say that I have achieved. Right. Rolling. So, that's my video. I've made 3 kits. I've shown one of them next to the real thing to compare how well it compares to the thingamabobs, and yeah, this is the end of the video. Anyway, this wasn't supposed to happen. As I was filming this, I haven't even finished building the Typhoon yet, and I'm still editing a video that was supposed to be out in May, that I have little hope of even finishing by the end of this month, which is July. I am sorry, but anyway, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for making this happen. Thanks for watching my stupid Airfix plane videos, and goodbye. Please leave a comment of what you thought. Like and subscribe.